I manipulate people's emotional state for a living. That's what I do. Like every marriage ends, it ends in death or divorce. I think a good lawyer is a weapon. My clients, some of them have a level of wealth that you couldn't even imagine. Guy had a net worth of about 9 billion. She got around half of it. Love is the most disruptive force.
Have you ever had any moral conflicts then when you're halfway through a case and you're like, shit, I'm representing the villain, what do I do here?
I represent the abused and I represent the abuser. When it comes to the actual hands-on courtroom stuff, they want me.
As a divorce lawyer, have you ever been divorced yourself?
Starting right with the juicy stuff.
Amber Heard or Johnny Depp?
Gunfight between those two, I was cheering for the bullets.
What are the main triggers and causes of divorce?
Like adultery, infidelity, financial stress. Those are a symptom. The underlying illness, in my opinion, is...
James, what's the most expensive divorce you've ever seen or been involved in?
I got paid $3 million from one of my clients over the course of 4 years. That's the most expensive one I've ever personally been involved in. The other side, in that case, paid $5 million across four law firms, because I just kept picking them off like one at a time. And every time she would get a negative outcome, she would fire her lawyers and hire new ones. I was on it from the beginning all the way to the end. But yeah, she spent $5 million. My client spent $3 million plus another $1 million or so each in expert fees. So it was probably, like, by the time it was all said and done, about a $12 million divorce. But for a couple that had $800 million worth of assets, you know, that wasn't as much money to them. He actually said to me with a straight face, that client, early in the case, we were talking about settlement concepts, and he said, well, look, I'm not going to argue with her over a couple of $1 million. I remember thinking, really? Okay. Because I argue a lot for a couple of $1 million. That's actually my job description. So, you know, that's, but he was very sincere. He was like, yeah, I'm not going to, who's going to quibble over what's a few million among former lovers, you know?
And what's the most you've seen one side have to give away to another side in a divorce settlement?
Somewhere in the neighborhood, assets wise, of about $4 billion. Yeah, $4 billion. Yeah. But that was, you know, a marriage of long duration. The guy had a net worth of about 9 billion. And, you know, she got around half of it, because when they got together, he didn't really have much. And she had really, you know, raised their kids. And, you know, this is all, New York is you know, it's very funny. My colleague in LA, Laura Wasser, represents like people you've heard of, you know, like she represents celebrities. And anytime a celebrity is getting divorced, Laura's usually represents one of the celebrities in the transaction. Phenomenal lawyer, great talent in the courtroom and out, and a great human being. The people I represent, you've never heard of, and they could buy those celebrities 10 times over. Like they're the ones who, you know, I had a client once say to me that, you know, when you go to an actor's house, there's pictures of that actor with other actors. And when you go to a producer's house, there's Picassos hanging up. And that's kind of like my clients. Some of them have a level of wealth that you couldn't even imagine. And I couldn't even imagine. But they are the most unostentatious. Like, they're just not ostentatious. They're very sedate. They drive a Jeep Grand Cherokee. They wear a Timex watch. They're not posh. They're just people who, they look like they're no one, and they could walk around in public and not have anyone recognize who they are. And yet they have a level of financial power that most of us couldn't even fathom. They can move markets with their trades.
Wow. So I want to get into all of this and your story in a moment, but I need to get a few of the fun questions out the way first.
Sure. I love it. You're starting right with the juicy stuff, which is fun. Usually people want to work into that, and I kind of love that you skip the foreplay, Rob. Like, you're right there. I love it.
Straight in. So what about the longest or messiest, or both, divorce you've been involved with?
I mean, that 3 million one, that pops right to mind. I mean, because that was about a 5-year divorce, and it was messy on every level. I mean, you know, what you really look at as a divorce lawyer is you think a lot about somebody comes into my office, like very rarely does anybody come into my office and say, you know, Jim, I would really like this to be expensive and protracted and just awful. I would like it to just consume my life for the next several years. No one says that. They all say the same thing. I want to be fair. I want to be fair. And their spouse is probably in another lawyer's office saying the same thing. The problem is they have very different definitions of what's fair, right? So this case, you know, would have been like if you wanted to teach in law school every complicated thing that could make a divorce ugly and protracted. It was like a perfect storm of all of those. There were substance use issues. There were closely held assets. There were complex ownership structures of their, you know, because look, super wealthy, you know, the ultra wealthy do not function the way that normal people function. They don't own very much. They have an interest in a trust, and the trust owns an LLC, and the LLC owns a percentage of ownership of a piece of real property. Like their structures are very complicated. Like, you know, I've had cases where people have generation skipping trusts where their grandchildren who haven't been born yet have a net worth of in the billions because they've put all of their assets into these complex trust structures, again, for wealth preservation and tax avoidance. So when you get into that sphere, that ultra high net worth sphere, those things you do to preserve wealth and to avoid taxation make a divorce extremely complicated because you don't own those assets anymore. Your grandchild who hasn't been born yet owns those assets. So now it turns into a very complicated, you know, transaction. So that was the ugliest, most protracted are the ones that have complex issues that require levels of nuance and a very kind of competitive storytelling. And the problem is, like Joseph Stalin said, like the death of one is a tragedy and the death of a million is a statistic. You know, if you only have a certain amount of money, if you have a couple of $1 million, you're not going to want to spend $500,000 in legal fees because it's a significant portion of your net worth. If I said to you right now, Rob, you're never going to believe it, I just heard you've won $27 million. And then I went, oh, I'm sorry, I got it wrong. 25 million. You wouldn't go, oh, duh. I was excited for a minute there. You know, 25 million, 27 million. Are you kidding me? It's a massive amount of money. I'm like, this is great. This is great. The first million's the hardest. So the truth is, like a lot of these people, you know, the money doesn't mean anything anymore. It's numbers on a page and it's a weapon to hit your spouse over the head with, you know, and that's really all it turns into. So those are the cases that get very protracted. But divorce is so emotional that without question, like there are people who would spend, you know, $10,000 fighting over a $5,000 bank account just because fuck you, that's why, you know, just because they want to stick it to this person so bad. And I've had people who I'll say to them, like, listen, man, you're going to spend $20,000 arguing over this. You might as well just give her the 10,000 she wants. And they'll go, no, I'd rather pay you. I like you better than her.
So there's loads of this I want to get into, but one thing I'm really fascinated in is what do you perceive that you do? So you're a divorce lawyer. Do you perceive that, you know, you're a lawyer or that you save people or what do you
definitely don't save people. Yeah.
What do you perceive?
I'm a full contact storyteller. I manipulate people's emotional state for a living. That's what I do. And I think that's true of a lot of professions. Like I think a salesman manipulates a person's emotional state. But mine is a very specific kind of manipulation. I want the judge to feel good about my client and bad about the other side. I want my adversary to feel scared. I want opposing client to feel afraid or greedy. I want my client to feel safe. So I'm trying to manipulate a lot of people's emotional state in a very high stakes chess game where all of the pieces have different values and that, you know, I can only control some of the variables. So I would say I'm that. I've also described myself as a weapon. You know, I think a good lawyer is a weapon. A trial lawyer, a good trial lawyer is a weapon. A weapon in the hands of a good person can protect things. And a weapon in the hands of a villain can cause chaos. And I'm hired to do both of those things at differing times. And sometimes I don't even know until I'm kind of halfway through, oh, okay, I'm representing the villain, because no one comes in and says, oh, I'm the villain. People come in and they say, oh, no, this is the facts of my story. And then when you start to get to the bottom of it, you go, okay. But the way our adversarial system works is that each person is entitled to the most vigorous defense within the bounds of advocacy. And, sometimes the truth has a way of coming out, sometimes despite my best efforts. And I take a lot of comfort in knowing that the truth tends to come out, even sometimes despite my best efforts.
Have you ever had any moral conflicts then when you're halfway through a case and you're like, shit, I'm representing the villain. What do I do here?
Well, I know what I do. I never have that last part. I never have the what do I do here? What I do here is my job. Like, that's my job. There's a line from Rissus Sardonicus that I've read and reread so many times that I have it by memory. And that is, I have resigned myself to temporary complicity with evil in order to accomplish certain strategic objectives for people whose suffering is more important than my need to maintain moral purity. And I take a lot of comfort in that. Like, my job, I'm not, like, the world needs bad men. We keep the other bad men from the door. And so my job is sometimes to protect people and to facilitate, the goals of a person who's a good parent who wants to take care of their children and wants to, and sometimes my job is to represent an agent of chaos and help them, leverage their children for financial benefit in the context of a divorce proceeding. And the way our system works is that I am not supposed to be the one to judge. The judge is the one who's supposed to judge. My job is to advocate on behalf of my client. And I represent my client and I represent the system. I don't always believe in my client, but I always believe in the system. And so I have times where it is painful emotionally on the inside for me to represent a person and vigorously advocate for them because I believe that they're not a good person or that they don't have noble goals. But it doesn't stop me from doing my job because I know I take my job seriously. I take the oath that I took very seriously. I think there is probably an African-American heart surgeon who probably has had to do surgery on someone with a swastika tattoo. And they probably go, no, my job is to save this person. I don't care if I'm going to save them and they're going to go on to hate me and to be a horrible person. My job is to save them. I took an oath and I treat it the same way. My job is to play the role I play within the system, which is to represent my client to the best of my ability. And I do that. I don't cheat. I don't break the rules. I want to win or lose a fair fight. But I'm gonna fight very hard.
Wow. So you said at times you feel very emotional, if you face the villain. What are those emotions and how do you deal with them?
It's a great question. I try in my real life, in my personal life, to maintain a real level of calm and simplicity. For someone who works in such a high conflict, high communication, fast-paced environment, in my private life, I'm very calm. I'm very quiet. I don't allow a lot of chaos in. I don't like take pleasure in debating politics. I'm not a guy who's going to get worked up if you cut me off in traffic. Like, all right, you're probably in more of a rush than me. I fight for a living. So I think when you fight for a living, you tend to not do a lot of it in your private life. So that's a piece. Another piece of it is that I just understand my place within the context of the system. So I'm very comfortable with that. I mean, I think it's hard to do the job sometimes. There are days where it's heavy on me. It's heavy on my heart to do what I do. But I'm usually not doing one case at a time. There's usually like 5 or 6 cases all happening at a time. And so at least 1 or 2 of those, I'm representing someone I really believe in. And in some ways, by the way, that's much scarier. Like, it's much scarier when you represent a person who you're right and like you really want to win for them, in an emotional way. Like, I want to win for all my clients, but some of them I know don't deserve to win. Like, what's scary is the person that you really know they deserve to win and you just need this judge to get it. Like, you just need this judge to hear you. And that's much more frightening to me. And how do I do that? I really just try to take it one task at a time. I'm very clean in the way I live. I exercise. I do, maybe I'm a bit of a cliche in that I do like the saunas and the cold plunge and stuff like that, because I do think like facing those extremes has been always very helpful for me. I do Brazilian jiu-jitsu. That helps a lot with stress. And on the jiu-jitsu mat, you're really not, no one cares what you do for a living. Like no one cares how much money you have or who you represent or what you know. They just want to know, do you know how to do that choke and do you do it well? And if you're good at it, all right, let me see you do it, So I love that. And in my private life, I take a lot of comfort in I have dogs. I love my dogs. I have deep friendships. I have a very rewarding relationship. I'm very grateful. I'm very grateful for the life I have. I really try to be who I am at work when I'm at work. And I try the rest of the time to not be that person. I'm at work most of the time. So I'm this person most of the time. But I enjoy when I get to step out of that character.
As a divorce lawyer, have you ever been divorced yourself?
I am divorced. I describe myself as happily divorced. But if anyone's divorce is like mine, if everyone's divorce was like mine, I would be out of a job. I would have to go do something else, because my ex-wife and I were college sweethearts. We met when we were 18. We got married at 22. We had kids at 24. And we divorced, when the kids were 5 and 7 in a very friendly way. And we've remained very dear friends. Our sons are 25 and 27 now. And one's a lawyer. He's an assistant district attorney in the Bronx. And the other one is a sound engineer. And they love their mom. She's been remarried for, 15 years, something like that. And to a great guy who I consider a friend. And, we're very lucky. Like we're very fortunate. We love our children. We've always loved our children more than any negativity between the two of us. We've never set foot in a courtroom. And I don't think it's because she was afraid to be in a courtroom with me. I think it's because we just are both people that, there's a lot of people I love I wouldn't want to be married to. I think that she loved me and I loved her and I still love her. And I think she still loves me, but not in the way that you're meant to love someone. I mean, the way we explained it to our kids when they were 5 and 7 was, Mom and I don't love each other the very special way that married people are supposed to. But we both love you and we're always going to be a family. And we made good on that promise. My older son just got engaged and she and I were chatting about, being excited for the wedding. And I have so many clients that like their kids getting married is such a trauma, because it's like, I can't be in a room with this person, much less standing next to them in a picture. And I just don't have that. I'm very blessed that my ex-wife is a friend to me. I'm a good ex-husband. I don't think I was a great husband. I'm impatient. I love my work. I don't think I love anything as much as I love my work. So I don't know what that says. That's just, I have the gift of being able to do a job that I'm really passionate about. So I think it's a hard act for any woman to follow.
So I want to come to the loving your work bit, because I'm an entrepreneur and I work every day, no days off ever. And, I have a massive entrepreneur community. So I want to pick into the entrepreneur specifically, but I do want to ask you, because I think this is a nice way to approach a difficult subject, but how do you have a happy divorce? Like, give us some steps that people can take to have what you call a happy divorce.
Yeah. I mean, it's not possible for everybody. I always say that a divorce is like a table with 4 legs. You've got you and your lawyer and her lawyer. And if one leg is off, it doesn't matter how nice and straight those other 3 legs are, that table's going to fall down. So, whenever people would say to me like, oh, how do you and your ex-wife do it? I'm like, she's a really reasonable person and I'm a really reasonable person. And we both concede the possibility of our own error. And we both consider that, oh, well, where's my culpability in what disagreement we have? And am I hearing this other person's perspective? And am I letting my ego get in the way? I mean, all of the things I would tell anybody to do to try to have as reasonable of a divorce as possible are very basic interpersonal communication things, like, listen to what the other person is saying and really try to get out of your own ego and get out of your own way and understand where they're coming from. Credit the things they're saying as coming from a place of love or intelligence. If they're wrong, rather than try to point out why they're wrong, like help them come to that by asking questions of it. Straw man, steel man, like all the classic things that anybody should do. So I think the most reasonable thing you can do is figure out how to be reasonable yourself. There's a there's an old Zen parable, I don't know if you've ever heard, where a woman goes to a monastery where there's a very renowned, monk and thinker, and she brings her son who's a little overweight, and she says, I want you to tell my son to stop eating candy. And the monk looks at the boy and he says, okay, come back in a week. So she's a little confused because she took a long trip to get there, but she leaves. She comes back in a week. She waits on the line again, and she gets to the front of the line, and he looks at the boy and he says, stop eating so much candy. And the mother says, I'm sorry, what? Why did you make me go away for a week before you just came back and said the thing I asked you to say? And he said, because a week ago I was still eating candy. And so I think that the lesson of that for me is look at yourself. Like, look at how you're interacting with your co-parent. I think that you have tremendous control over your own emotional state and your own communications. We're much more powerful in that regard than we think. And the mind is a great servant and a terrible master, so I think you have to approach it that way. And Schopenhauer said that, we make the mistake of thinking that humans are thinking machines that sometimes feel. I think we're feeling machines that sometimes think. I think we're mostly emotional. So I think you have to get that in check about yourself, and then you can figure out how to navigate the emotional state of your partner, of your co-parent, of your soon-to-be ex.
You don't come across as someone who's like skeptical and beat down about humanity, when you must have seen pretty much every dirty and evil thing about humanity. So just talk about that.
I think those things are a natural segue to each other, to be honest. I think when you spend enough time, like I represent the abused and I represent the abuser. And I represent the person who's married to someone with substance use issues, and I represent people with substance use issues. I represent great parents, and I represent absolutely awful parents by any objective metric. And you come to figure out that, the world, like, there's human emotional complexity. Like, I don't, like, hurt people. If someone's a perpetrator of abuse, they usually grew up in an environment where there was abuse, so my experience of people has been, it doesn't make me love them less. Like I'm not cynical, I really believe that the parts of our hearts that are weighed down with hatred and that are weighed down with anger and things like that are the parts that are broken and hurt, and there's plenty to break and hurt anybody in the world, so I see a lot of it. I have my hands in it a lot of the time. I facilitate some of it but it hasn't changed my look on humanity. It hasn't changed my view of love. It hasn't. I think there's something really shocking to me that 56% of marriages end in divorce, and yet it's assumed that it's something you should do. And to add to that 86% of people who get divorced are remarried within 5 years of their divorce. Now, that statistic's even more shocking to me, but also indicative of the fact that, like, there's something to this. There's something in us that wants it. Like, there's something in us that goes, yeah, no, but I want that. Like, if I told you there's a 56% chance you're going to get hit in the head with a bowling ball when you walk out of the door, you're not going to walk out, or you're going to wear a helmet. But marriage, like, of course, like, of course you're going to get married. Everyone's going to get married. Why wouldn't you get married? You're not going to get married. You must have intimacy issues. And what? Are you kidding? 56%, guys? That's crazy. There's people that go, I won't go skydiving because there's a 1 in whatever tens of thousands chance. Okay, this is a 56% chance that it's going to fail to the level that you quit. Forget the another, 10, 20% that stay together miserable for the kids because they don't want to give away half their shit. So now you got a technology fail 76% of the time. That's crazy. And yet, I get it. I go to weddings. I get misty-eyed at weddings. I love it. I love cheering for them. I'm like, yeah, of course. Yeah, of course you try. Give it a try.
Have divorce rates gone up in your career since you started?
They've gone up and down. I mean, I've been doing it 25 years. So when I started, they were at a high because the economy was at a high. And it's very interesting. Like, moderation is actually good for marriage. Like, boredom is in like a societal way, boredom is really good for marriage. Like when things go really badly, you know, there's a spike in the divorce rate because it's like people lose their jobs and people, you know, but there's also the counterbalance of nothing unites like a common enemy. So like in the early months of COVID, there was no divorce filings happening because everyone was like, oh my God, you know, we got to keep it together. And like the kids are home and we're going to figure that out. And, you know, but then there was, of course, after COVID, you know, restrictions changed. There was a massive spike in the divorce rate. And some of that is that people were like, hey, I said for better or for worse, I didn't say for lunch. But, you know, some of that is also that there was economic stress that were placed on things. And when the economy is in a boom, when I started in the early 2000s, the economy was in a boom. It was before the subprime crisis hit. The real estate market was going through the roof. Everybody's house was worth more money than you could imagine. And you could go into a bank with a piece of crayon and say, I need a loan. And they'd be like, here's $1 million against your house. Here's a third home equity line against your house. And so money was going crazy. So people were like, hey, listen, I can afford to leave. I can afford to give you half. Okay, I'm going. Or they're running around having affairs, having a good time because they had money to pay for the hotels or pay for the girlfriend's jewelry. So, you know, I'm in a recession-proof industry. It's fascinating. When the economy's good, we're busy. When the economy's bad, we're busy. When the economy kind of stays mellow, then we're still busy, but we're not as crazy busy, let's say.
Wow. And what are the main triggers and causes of divorce? And maybe are there a couple of silent ones in there that catch people off guard?
Yeah, I mean, the big things that people talk a lot about are the sort of nail in the coffin final marriage killers like adultery, infidelity, you know, financial impropriety and financial stress. Those are the big marriage killers. But I've always said that those are a symptom, not the underlying illness. The underlying illness, in my opinion, is disconnection. That people we fall in love really fast. And it's like an instant connection, attraction, all those wonderful things. And then we fall out of love. You know, it's kind of like, you know, how do people go bankrupt? Very slowly and then all at once. You know, and that's kind of how people fall out of love is they go very slowly, they disconnect and they start to fall apart. And then at some point, something just pushes it. And it's like, that's that final, you know, like it's the final raindrop responsible for the flood. It's the final, like there is a snowflake that lands on the branch that snaps the branch. That snowflake is no heavier than any other snowflake. It was just the final one that was heavy enough. So you could point at that snowflake and go, man, that snowflake broke the branch. No, all the snowflakes broke the branch. That was the last one. So I genuinely believe that it's disconnection. And I think that's caused primarily by two things, that we don't know what we want clearly, and we don't know how to say to our partner what we want. And we're afraid of little conflicts, so we avoid them, and in the process cause giant conflicts. You know, I look, you're an entrepreneur, and I've enjoyed your show, and I know that you are someone who leans into difficult things, right? Like you're not someone, you know, you're like a David Goggins in the sense that it's like, look, I lean into things that are hard. I trade what I want now for what I want most. You know, that's the nature of an entrepreneur is to say, okay, yeah, I know what would be fun right now, but I also know what I can invest in right now, what risk I can tolerate, what challenges I can tolerate in order to have the thing I want most. Marriage is very much an example of that. It's about like, what do you want right now is going to be different than what you want long-term. You know, you want depth of connection. So sometimes to have that, you have to have temporary disconnection. You have to upset your spouse from time to time in order to be your authentic self, you know, so that you can really be in the marriage and present in the marriage. So I think that people's fear of that is what leads them into my office. There's a straight line from when you start lying to yourself and then also by proxy lying to your spouse because you're not being honest with your spouse because you're not being honest with yourself. And there's a straight line from that right into my office.
Are entrepreneurs more susceptible to divorce? Are we nightmares to be married to? I mean, I think my wife needs an MBE in the UK, you know, some kind of badge of honor for staying with me for nearly 20 years.
Yeah. If she'd killed you, she'd have been out of jail by now.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, 20 years, a long sentence. You know, entrepreneurs are unique. I represent a lot of entrepreneurs and business owners. their superpower is also the thing that makes them challenging as spouses and challenging as clients, and that is that they have to have a risk tolerance. Like you cannot, like if you want safe, you're not going to be an entrepreneur. Like entrepreneurs leverage risk in exchange for opportunity. Like that's all it comes down to, you know? And I represent a lot of people with a level of risk tolerance that I do not have in my personal life at all, you know? And it is sometimes shocking to me how much risk they're willing to take, and therefore the rewards that they're able to receive. And every entrepreneur has a relationship with risk. And so divorce, you know, marriage, if marriage is about stability, consistency, reliability, showing up for someone, you know, those are great traits for an entrepreneur to have, but they have to be hedged against a risk tolerance, a willingness to think outside the box, a willingness to be creative, to have a big imagination. You know, the old saying of talent is hitting a target nobody else can hit. Genius is hitting a target nobody else can see. And that's what an entrepreneur has, a vision, and they believe in that vision. And very often they believe in that vision more than they believe in anything, like more than they believe in they have a relationship with that vision, you know? And that vision, like the entrepreneur mindset, is about purpose, passion, and profit. And it's usually purpose and passion, and the profit's like the side effect. Like most successful entrepreneurs, the money's how you keep score. It's not, you're not doing it for the money. How many watches can you own? How many cars can you own? How big can your house be? You know, it really is at a certain point about, you know, achieving something, building something, creating something, turning a vision into something real and tangible. So, you know, again, those are some skills that if used the right way can make you a phenomenal parent, a phenomenal partner in a romantic relationship. You know, if you're an entrepreneur, you're used to delegation of responsibility if you're doing it right. You're used to putting management in place if you're doing it right. So you know how to incentivize people. You know how, so like entrepreneurs can be phenomenal if you view your marriage as one of your entrepreneurial enterprises. You know, like I'm going to commit time to this. I'm going to be disciplined about it. I'm going to make sacrifices for it. I'm going to accept certain risks in exchange for potential rewards. I'm going to listen to the customer. I'm going to look at the market. I'm going to change as conditions require me to change. I'm not going to stagnate and lock in, right? Like an entrepreneur locks into a vision, but they don't get married to like the specific way. When market conditions change, when competitors change, then they go, okay, we got to shift on the fly. I got to recognize and adapt. That's the recipe for a good marriage. So I will tell you, I don't think I see as many entrepreneurs in my office as I do company men and company women, people who work for a big financial institution, people who work for a big company, C-suite executives.
Why is that?
I see a lot of those. I think they have a level, I mean, this is speculation. I'm going to sound like I'm trying to be Freud here, but I think they have a different level of control. There's something about the entrepreneurial mindset that is very much like, I'm going to eat what I kill. Like I'm going to rely on myself, and I'm going to go out and build a thing and rely on myself. And as someone who started a law firm with a $5,000 loan, you know, and some money I'd put away by waiting tables for a long time, I had nothing, you know, and I built it into a multi-million-dollar firm with multiple locations, and I represent some of the wealthiest people in the world, and I'm possibly the best known divorce lawyer in the world. And I wouldn't say I'm the best one, but I'm well known. And, you know, that just came from being hungry, you know, and wanting to be passionate about doing my work and doing it well. I wanted to do it well every day, and I still every day want to do it really well. And so, you know, I think entrepreneurs have a certain mindset that is very conducive to marriage. But when they get divorced, it's a complete train wreck because, you know, they often have very hard to value assets. You know, they often have what we call a key man discount applicable, which is like, I couldn't sell my business to someone. I am my business. Like, I can't say, oh, thanks for hiring Jim Sexton as your lawyer. By the way, this is Bob Smith. He's going to actually be doing the trial. No, there's only one of me, and I can train people. I've taught a lot of lawyers, and I have great people who work for me. I'm very blessed in that regard. But like, when it comes to the actual hands-on courtroom stuff, they want me, So there's limitations to that. It's scalable only to a certain degree. And when people divorce, I think, who are entrepreneurs, that risk tolerance that's made them a good entrepreneur can make them a challenging client, because they're willing to roll the dice with big things, and divorce is big stuff.
Is there a type of job or career or place in the world where the divorce rates are really high?
The divorce rates are pretty high in America. They're fairly high in the UK. Asia does not have the level of divorce that the European countries have. The more religious the underlying nature of a culture is, the more divorce is often frowned upon. So like Ireland had, almost no divorce. It was impossible to get divorced for a period of time, and the divorce rate's still quite low. UAE, very low divorce rates, partly because it's a very religious-based society. Divorce rates are complicated in the sense that it's a statistic of how many marriages end in the very specific legal thing of a divorce. There's also people that just go out for milk and never come back. Like, there's also people that just leave their marriage. They just split. And then they like,
and
when people
you mean
remarry,
and don't get divorced? You mean
they just don't get divorced.
Yeah,
they just move on. They just leave, and that's a pretty common thing. So if you create too many barriers to exit, people just do that. But there are countries like Poland, for example, still has a fairly substantial Catholic underpinning within the country. So divorce is frowned upon. But the question I have to ask myself, and there is no way to answer it, is, what's the marriage satisfaction rate? Because I'm not really interested in guess what? You managed to stay married and absolutely miserable for 50 years. Great job. Like, I don't know. I just don't think that's good. I understand that there's, people that would say, well, the Bible says otherwise, the Quran says otherwise. And okay, I get it. But, I don't believe that, the purpose, like the goal of life is to tiptoe through life and arrive safely at death. Like, I tend to think that life is meant to be lived, and you're meant to find joy. And I'm not suggesting that we should be hedonists and that the only thing that should be our pursuit is pleasure. But I definitely don't think I think if you're miserable in a relationship, that there are 8 billion people in the world. The chances are you may have someone else in that other 8 billion that might give you joy, and that you might give them joy. So it's just kind of a weird, if there's 8 billion people in the world and you happen to find your soulmate at the college you went to, like, that's a hell of a coincidence, So I tend to think that, divorce statistics, although they're interesting and anecdotal, and they do tell us something about our level of like the triumph of faith over reason, that we keep trying at this thing, even though we suck at it as a species. I don't think that they're that important.
How do you deal with a really toxic, difficult ex?
Rules. I think rules are good. I think that you have to train a difficult ex like you would a puppy. I say this to clients at the risk of being disrespectful to their ex-spouse, because by the time you get your divorce settlement, or by the time you finish your trial, you've been in my office for 6 months, a year, 2 years going through it. And so you never really want to see lawyers again. Like, you've spent so much money on lawyers, you've been in court or negotiating tables so many times that you're just like, oh my God, I don't want to do anything. So if you have an obnoxious, obstreperous, difficult co-parent or ex-spouse, and they immediately start violating the rules, either the rules of your agreement or of the order that was issued by the court, it's perfectly natural to go, I'm not, whatever. Like, she's 30 minutes late. Who cares? Like, I'm not going to do anything. But that's a little bit like, and I'm a dog person, like, you get a little puppy and you want it to sleep on its puppy bed, but then it like whines and cries and it wants to get in bed with you. So you're like, all right, it'll shut it up and we can get some sleep, and you put it in bed with you. That's fine. But you're going to have a 90-pound German Shepherd sleeping in your bed. And let me tell you, it's a whole lot easier to train a little tiny puppy than a 90-pound German Shepherd. So like I get it when somebody says, you know what, I'm not going to go after her for these dumb little things. Okay. But then you're teaching a sort of lawlessness. So my feeling is you have to train them like a puppy. You have to hold them to rules. You have to tell them if you're going to play games, that I'm going to take you to court. There are going to be repercussions for it, so that early on they figure out, all right, you know what? I'm not going to play games with this.
Have you noticed any major red flags in people that, make them major candidates for divorce? I mean, maybe it's a green flag for, your law firm, but.
I think we divorce the person we marry. And I think that there's a lid for every pot. I think that it's really less about the individual character. I mean, of course I could say to you, like, people who have too much narcissism, or who have narcissistic personality disorder, or people with borderline personality disorder, or people with serious substance use issues. Of course, they have a difficult time with relationships. People who are very impatient have a hard time with relationships. People who have very poor communication skills often have, like, these are all red flags. But, it's also about finding someone that's complementary to you, because I know people that the things that attract them to someone are kind of the opposite of things that would make for a good marriage. Like you've been married a long time, and I imagine you and your wife are not the same personality-wise. And there's a polarity that I think people need to have. Like, I'm so hard charging that I need a partner who's like, okay, let's just chill. Like, let's just, and I'm so like, I want to be Beyonce all the time, and someone's got to be Destiny's Child. Like, somebody's got to be like, you can't all be Lionel Richie. Somebody's got to be the Commodores. Like, you have to have someone who's the main character, and people who are willing to be supporting presence. And those people are incredibly important. As an entrepreneur, the people on your team are incredibly important, So I think sometimes what would appear to be a red flag, it may be something that requires a polarity. Like, I think that what's right for one type of relationship, might be like, some person's trash is another person's treasure. So someone who's not terribly motivated, and someone who's, kind of like chill. Yeah, if you're looking for a partner who's hard charging, yeah, you're going to have a hard time, but if you're the kind of person who's like, you might want someone like that. Like, the things that make for a good boyfriend or girlfriend might not make for a great husband or wife. Like, I know a lot of people that are like, oh yeah, he was a musician, and it was so cool. And like, he got backstage, I would go backstage and I would be, okay. And then he's on the road like 9 months of the year. And you're alone a lot of the time. And if you have a kid with that person, like, you got to either travel with them all over God's green earth, or you have to say, okay, I'll see you in a couple of months. And then when the kids start school, like, I've represented the spouses of professional musicians, or the professional musicians themselves. And, these people that sell out stadiums, but their life is a nomadic life. It's a challenging life. It's sexy as hell. A chef. I've represented some celebrity chefs, amazing chefs. Do you know the hours a chef works? They work every Mother's Day. Forget it. It's the busiest night ever in restaurants. They're constantly, and what are they doing? They're at a restaurant. They're working in the nighttime, surrounded by hostesses and hosts who are like young, gorgeous people in their 20s. I think that's going to play out. And at the end of the night, they're exhausted. So what do? They have a couple of drinks with the other. I worked in restaurants, couple of drinks with everybody who's in the staff. Next thing you know, people are in the broom closet. Like, this is how it works. So again, what you're looking for in a boyfriend or a girlfriend, it may not be the same as what you look for in a partner. Look, you and I may get along wonderfully as friends, but do you want to go into business with me? Do you have those specific characteristics? There's a lot of people I love that I would not want to be married to, because it's a very specific kind of relationship. And we put a lot on it. Like, your spouse is supposed to be the best friend, best conversationalist, best financial partner, best roommate, best co-parent, best travel companion. Wow. Do you have any other job in your organization that has a list of seeking candidate who that reads like that? Because that's a hell of a list. So I think, I'm sure that there are parts of your description of what you want in a person that only your wife can fit. And then there are certain ways that you are probably incompatible. You know, I like this music, she likes this music. She likes the mornings, I like the nighttime, whatever. But that polarity is enough polarity to keep it interesting, but not enough to make you antagonistic to each other. Because that's what happens. The polarity that makes us fall in love sometimes turns into the polarity that makes us resent each other and can't stand each other.
Even though you're a very successful entrepreneur, lawyer, has it surprised you how much you've blown up on social media with your content?
It has. Yeah, it has. You know, I wrote my book a couple of years, actually like 5 years ago now. And I did, you know, some press for that. It was really the first time I'd done real press. And I enjoyed it, but I didn't really think much about it because my job is such a demanding job time-wise, and it requires so much dedication that I didn't really think about, you know, wanting to build any kind of a media presence. And in the last year or so, it's really blown up to the point where I kind of can't go anywhere without a few people saying, "Oh my God, you're the divorce lawyer." You know, some of them know my name. Most of them just go, "You're the divorce lawyer." The other thing I would say to you, Rob, is if you're going to blow up, if you want any anonymity, don't have the outfit you are in the videos that millions of people have seen be the outfit you wear every single day. like I wear this 5 days a week. And so I'm very recognizable because I always wear a 3-piece suit. I always have my sleeves rolled up. I happen to have the tattoos. So those are, you know, the last remaining vestiges of a wayward youth. And so I am very recognizable. So yeah, I never saw it coming. I still don't completely understand it. I didn't, it's very funny, you know, like whoever discovered water, it wasn't a fish. Like I would sometimes, you know, be talking to a friend and they'd say like, "Oh, you know, what are you doing this week?" And I'm like, "Oh, I have this trial." And they're like, "Oh, what's it about?" I'm like, "Oh, my client was, you know, sleeping with the nanny, and then he convinced his wife to have a threesome with the nanny, and then the nanny ended up running off with the wife." And they're like, "What? Are you kidding?" And I go, "Oh yeah, I guess that is pretty crazy. That's like a pretty crazy story." But like, to me, it's like, you know, that's okay. Like, that's just another story. It's like that's Tuesday, you know, like you just see really, really crazy stuff all the time, and every variety of human perversion and wackiness. And you just sort of go like, oh yeah, you start to see the world very different. I imagine I had a friend when I was younger who was a stripper, an exotic dancer. And she said to me once that she had to consciously remember when she would answer her door to put clothes on, because she was so used to being naked that, like, you know, like there would be like a ring at the door and she'd like just go to open the door and she'd be like, I would forget that I'm completely naked, because she was like, I spent so many hours completely naked the night before or the day of. And it's sort of like that for me. Like I sometimes don't realize how shocking the things I see and do are. And if I don't end up talking that much about my work except in a media context, but I sometimes don't understand, like, and then when somebody goes, "Oh, that's fascinating," I'm like, "Is it? Okay. All right. I didn't know that was so much." Like when I did the first Soft White Underbelly interview with Mark Liotta, that now has like 6 million views and was really like the first thing that blew up, you know, and brought me to a lot of the other even bigger, you know, things I've done. I didn't understand why Mark wanted to interview me. Like I had been a fan of Soft White Underbelly for years, and I love it as a YouTube channel. And when my secretary said, "Yeah, there's somebody named Mark from Soft Belly on," and I was like, "Oh." So I picked up and he said, "Yeah, I'm interested in doing an interview with you." And I said, "You know, I'm not a fentanyl addicted prostitute, right? Like this is a wrong number." And he's like, "No, I'm really trying to do more of like interesting people that have interesting professional lives or personal lives." So I went and just did it. And I just literally, it's like this, like I went in and just talked, and, you know, I was just very blunt and honest. And next thing I knew, it was like millions and millions of views. And I'm getting emails from, you know, from Lex Friedman and from Andrew Huberman and people who I really respect and admire for years. And I really had no idea like why. I really had no idea why it was. And what's interesting is, of course, you know, as an entrepreneur, like people immediately want to like monetize this. They're like, so what are you doing with all of this? And I'm like, I have a job. Like I've been offered podcast deals. I've been offered, all kinds of, like I've had a number of networks offer me, programs, production companies offer me programs. I've had a lot of podcast offers. And I have to tell people like, no, I love my job. Like I love I'm still doing the job. Like this is, the job is the priority. This is just sort of a side gig, that I enjoy. I enjoy talking about what I do because I'm very passionate about it. I like it. It's not, I'm not selling anything more. I have more clients than I could possibly service. I'm very picky now about who I represent. And I probably do 6-7 consults a week, and I probably take 2 new cases a month. So I turn away a lot of business. I refer it out to, thank God, there's a lot of people who do what I do and a lot of people who do it really well. But I haven't even really grown the firm because I don't want to dilute what it is I do. I understand that people are hiring me for me. So, but yeah, it's been crazy. I mean, it's wild to get to meet people whose programs I enjoy. I've listened to you. I've listened to Diary of a CEO. I listened to Lex Fridman for years. Like I jokingly tell people that I was riding the subway from Manhattan to Queens to go to a trial listening to Lex Fridman. And I got off the subway and went to check my email. And I had an email from Lex Fridman saying, hey, I'm a podcaster and I'd like to have you on. And I was like, this is really weird. I've been listening to him for the last hour and a half. So, it's really surreal. I didn't see it coming, but it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun and I'm very honored. People come up to me like crazy and talk to me and say they like my work. And it makes me really happy to know that, that people enjoy it and find it interesting. Again, I don't think I'm as interesting as other people apparently think I am.
Well, I do.
Thanks, Rob. I appreciate it. But you're a salesman, so I don't know, who can trust you? I'm a lawyer, you're a salesman. Who can trust each other? No, it's great. I appreciate it. I really do. I was looking forward to this.
So a lot of people say that, money doesn't make you happy. I'm not sure I agree, but I'd love your take. So are the divorces worse? Therefore, were the marriages worse? The more money that's involved? Have you noticed a money marriage divorce correlation or not?
Yeah, I have not noticed that correlation. What I'll tell you is I think that money can't buy happiness, but it can definitely upgrade your despair. I think that money, my mentor, Neil Postman in graduate school used to say that money offered real solutions to imaginary problems and imaginary solutions to real problems. So, money can't solve the problem of loneliness, but it can, provide you opportunities to be around large numbers of people that might feel like it's resolving your loneliness. It doesn't necessarily resolve the underlying, issue. So I think, it's kind of an improved means to an unimproved end. But as someone who's been broke, like really, really broke, like used to go to the diner with friends and I would eat their pickles and coleslaw because I couldn't afford to order anything. And I didn't, I wasn't the kind of person to say, hey, can you buy me a burger? It's much nicer having money. It's great. I mean, it's really, really nice. Like money's really useful in almost any number of settings. But, I do think, as many people have said before me who are smarter than me, that there's only 2 amounts of money, enough and not enough. That's it. And defining enough for yourself is really important. I heard someone say recently that money is like gasoline in your car, that you don't want to run out of gas, but life is not meant to be a tour of gas stations. I think that money is really important. And when people get a certain amount of money, like an abundance of money, there are certain stresses that helps take away, but there are other stresses that it creates. So I have found in my experience professionally that when people lose their job and it creates financial stress on a couple, that can be very, very toxic. It can also be very toxic on a person to lose their job or to make a bad investment or to have a business fail because it affects their sense of their own self-worth. As an entrepreneur, like we fall in love with our vision. You know, we fall in love with our vision the way we fall in love with our spouse. Like we can see it. It's right there, you know, and like that's what an amazing entrepreneur mind does, is it can imagine this thing and then it can see it and it can find the path to it, you know. But when that thing betrays you, you know, when through no fault of your own, you know, through market forces or competition or regulation, you know, the thing falls away, like, you know, you lose a piece of yourself, and you can't help but be angry at the world or yourself or whoever. And who do we take our anger out on? You know, the people around us, the people we are with. So, you know, I think that money, again, can be, you know, it's a great servant and a terrible master. You know, I think that poverty is very, very hard. The divorce rates speak to poverty as an indicator for divorce. So socioeconomic struggle very often leads to marriage instability. I mean, that's what the statistics bear out. But the ultra wealthy also have a very hard time staying married. So once again, there's like a sweet spot. You know, there's a sweet spot of wealth without it becoming just, you know, ridiculous, you know, a ridiculous amount of wealth and all that comes with that level of wealth. Also, too, I observe, because now I represent different kinds of people, you know, celebrity is also a whole nother thing. You know, there's if I was to rank order what a person would want to be, you know, being famous but broke is really bad. That's the worst thing to be. Being broke and unknown, it's not great. That's not something I'd wish on most people. Being rich and famous is good, but the fame, you're giving something up, like you're losing something real. Like fame is the mask that eats into the wearer. I represent a lot of people that are not famous and they're really wealthy. And I have to tell you, if there's something to aspire to, that's the thing to aspire to, is to be rich and not famous. Like famous puts stresses on things and makes things that used to be simple very hard. And again, levels of fame. Like it's love. I have a beautiful thing going right now. Like I'll go, if I stand at Starbucks for too long waiting for my drink, someone will come up to me and go, "Oh my gosh, you're the divorce lawyer." And hey, how you doing? That's great. Blah, blah, blah. And maybe they'll say, "Can I take a selfie with you?" Absolutely. Take us up, and that's it. That's not the level that, you know, like Brad Pitt deals with, where he just can't, Taylor Swift, you just can't go anywhere. You have no privacy. Everyone feels like they need a piece of you and you owe it to them. And if you don't give them that piece, they think you're a jerk and they'll go online and tell everybody what a jerk you are. To me, that's really, I mean, I have so many clients who get falsely accused of you know, infidelities, or get falsely accused. They get sued for ridiculous things because they're that tall blade of grass, you know, that the mower is going to go for. So I think that wealth and celebrity, they correlate with marital discord, but I also think economic instability is very bad for marriages too.
Mm. So I heard this fascinating idea that a marriage should last 7 years and expire and then be re-engaged into. What do you think about that?
I think that exists already.
Oh,
I think it exists in the sense that you wake up every day and decide to stay married. That's
a cop-out answer.
Or not. I think people wake up every day and decide to stay married. Look, I think there could be a lease with an option to buy. I think that there's a
break clause.
Marriage. Yeah, we can do marriage however we want. It's a man-made technology, gang. Like we came up with these rules, we can change them. You know, I mean, but that being said, the core component of that is not meant to be a cop-out. The core component is you wake up every day. You could leave. Like you could leave. Give up half your stuff. Trust me, you're still okay. Like you'll be fine. Like, so you're not there because you don't want to give up half your stuff. I hope you're not married because you don't want to get divorced. You're married because you like being married. You're married because you look at this person and you go, man, they add value to my life and I hope I add value to theirs. You know, there's this beautiful symbiosis happening here. Like that's why you stay married. That's a beautiful reason to stay married. But you choose that every day. Like every day you wake up and just look, I'll take it a step further. I think every day I wake up and decide to be Jim Sexton. You know, you wake up, decide to be Rob Moore. Like you can wake up tomorrow and be like, you know what? I'm not doing this anymore. I'm doing something different. I'm going to just move to a different town and do a different thing. So I tend to, if we made this prison, then we have the key, to getting out. So I don't, but yeah, look, I think people could make renewable options. The problem is there's always second order effects. California did this interesting thing called community property. So their idea was, because, when you get married, you have all the stuff you owned before you were married. And that's what they call separate property. Okay. And then anything you acquire from the day you get married on, that's marital property. It's presumed to be marital property. So if you buy your wife a Rolex watch, you bought yourself one half of a Rolex watch. Like you buy her a Birkin bag, you bought yourself one half of a Birkin bag because you're one person in the eyes of the law. So California had this bright idea where they said, if you're married for 7 years, now you're like extra married. You're like super married. You've been married enough. You've like mellowed into it. You've truly married, right? So now we're going to have what's called community property, which is when you hit the 7-year mark, everything you had before the marriage, it's all marital now. The whole thing's a big marital sandwich now. And the goal of this was to like increase unity, to just say, look, the first 7 years you're practicing at the thing. And then once you hit the 7-year mark, now you're really married. And there's no such thing as yours and mine and ours. It's ours. What it ended up doing in practice is spiking the divorce rate at the 6.5-year mark.
Wow.
Because what happened is at about the 6.5-year mark, the honeymoon's over. Maybe you got a kid or two. You've definitely smelled each other's feet. And you go, okay, I got 6 months before everything I owned before this marriage comes into play if we ever split up. And that is a weird wager to have to make. So, that's I think there are potential second order effects to creating sunset clauses or like signposts that if you hit this number that you get to re-up or you could cancel the contract. Like it creates a real weird friction there. It's like a weird, competing interests. And I don't know that that's true. I think it's better to look at your marriage as a choice you make every single day.
Prenups, do they work? Do they help?
Yes, and yes. Prenups are important. Prenups work. I mean, again, UK is a little different than the USA, but prenups are binding. Prenups are enforceable. Prenups are a good idea. What I tell people, and I will sing this from the mountaintops till the day I die, is everyone has a prenup. It's either one that was written by the government, or it's one that was written by you and this person that you allegedly like more than the other 8 billion people in the world. So who is more qualified to create the rule set that will govern your marriage? You and your partner, or the government? Because I have to tell you something. You've ever been to the Department of Motor Vehicles? You've ever been to a government institution? Have you ever looked around and gone, we should put these people in charge of everything? We should put these people in charge of my marriage and family life for sure. I've never felt that way when I went to the Department of Motor Vehicles or when I went to the passport agency. I have always looked around and gone, how are they making this so hard? Like, why can't you get some entrepreneurial mindset in here and have some increased competition and figure out a way to make this not suck? Well, you have a prenup. You have rules that govern your marriage. You don't know them, but you have them. And by the way, the time most people learn them for the first time is in my office. So you're learning how to fight when you're already in a fight. Like you're learning about your rights and obligations when they're about to be put right in your face. That to me is not a great way to do things. So I like prenups because I like a rule set. I like a game where I know the rule set, and I like a game where we wrote the rule set and where we actually don't know how the rules are going to apply. So, when they say when economists are trying to come up with like an intelligent economy, you come up with one that you don't know where you'd land in that economy, but you'd still think it's a fair system, right? So it's the same thing with this. A prenup is at the beginning of a marriage. So if you go, look, I don't know when I'm going to be up or when I'm going to be down in this thing, but this is a rule set I can live with. I love that. I think that that's great. And I actually think it's also, and this isn't me trying to push prenups because divorce lawyers, we lose more money on prenups than we make. Getting a prenup done is not expensive, and it prevents hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars in legal fees if it's done the right way. But what I like about prenups is I actually think it's an invitation to have some really important discussions that people who are that committed to each other should be willing to have.
So, as maybe the most famous divorce lawyer in the world, who was the biggest narcissist, Amber Heard or Johnny Depp?
I'm going to go Amber Heard on that one.
Ooh.
Yeah, I watched some of that trial with great interest. I mean, look, I have to tell you, in a gunfight between those two, I was cheering for the bullets. I really didn't, I thought they both just embarrassed themselves publicly, and neither of them walked out of that trial looking good. But I have to tell you, I think from what I saw of that testimony, I haven't met Amber Heard, but I've met Amber Heard. Like she is a type. And it's a type I've seen before. It's the type that threatens, that uses a disparity and an inequality in how certain aspects of the system treat gender roles and weaponizes it. And I am particularly disgusted by that because I have represented genuine victims of intimate partner abuse. And so when someone cries wolf, it is a really horrible thing because it really devalues the plight of actual victims of intimate partner abuse and domestic violence. That being said, I don't give Johnny Depp a pass for some of the boorish, awful behavior that came out at trial. I think that, some of the ways that he was recorded interacting with her and speaking to her and conducting himself, he shouldn't be proud of that. I didn't get the impression he was proud of it. I think he was someone who was struggling with substance use issues, and, that came out, that he's not perfect. But I think there's a difference between imperfect and like nefarious. And I felt that there was a mask that slipped a few times. I also thought, Johnny Depp's attorneys did a phenomenal job. I mean, it's hard for me to watch a trial and do anything other than pay attention to the lawyering. And I think that there was some excellent lawyering going on there, particularly on Johnny Depp's side of the table. But yeah, I mean, that was my take on that.
What particular good lawyering skills happened in the Depp Heard case?
I think on cross-examination, Johnny Depp's lead counsel, I forget what her name is, she did a very good job of, the worst cross-examinations are a recitation of concepts and the other person saying no. If you ever want to see really bad cross-examination, just watch a Senate hearing, because they do things like say, isn't it true you did this because you hate women? No. Isn't it true that you don't care about people? No. Like it's not useful. It's just asking, it's like giving a speech and allowing the other person to say, no, that's not true. So to me, the best cross-examination, and we saw some of it on display there in the Depp and Heard trial, was getting a person to commit to a principle, thinking that it's helping their case, and then weaponizing and snapping that on them. So talking about how so you feel it's unfair to not allow a person to leave a room when they want to leave the room. Yes. And in fact, you said that he did that on several occasions, and you consider that to be an abusive behavior. Isn't that right? Yes. And this person's going, oh my God, this lawyer's doing a terrible job. Like and they're like, now, that's something you've done to him, isn't it? Okay, this is terrible. Now, what do you say? Yes, because you just said it was abusive. No, all right. They're asking you because they know they got the video or they got the audio, or they're going to have witnesses who said they saw you do it. So I kind of love watching a lawyer set it up and then snap the trap. It's my favorite part of lawyering. Is cross-examination. I mean, there's a joke among trial lawyers that cases are won on direct examination and they're lost on cross-examination, because cross-examination is just the most fun thing to watch and to do. And so, anytime I get to watch high-level competitors, for me, watching a trial like that, it's like, someone who likes basketball watching Michael Jordan play. I love watching. There's lawyers in New York who, John Teitler is a great example of one. Larry Greenberg is another one. These are all great lawyers who I go against, who I have cases against, and they're just the best of the best. It's like playing basketball against Michael Jordan. It's like, and for me, I want to be the first among equals. Like I want to go against the best. It's not fun for Michael Jordan to play against a Pee Wee league. It's fun for him to play against someone. Like everybody needs their competitor, their equal who they can go against. And so I love watching good lawyers. It's the best, better than TV.
What's a story you've never shared or a secret you've never told?
I killed a guy. No, I'm kidding. I didn't. No one's recording this, right?
That's the clip. That's the clip.
Story I've never told. The problem with being a lawyer is that you're not allowed to tell a lot of your stories because you're not allowed to waive attorney-client privilege. And attorney-client privilege survives after the death of the client. So like, I'm not even allowed, I have dead celebrities I represented that I can't talk about the facts of their case, even though they're dead, so that's a little challenging. Stories I've never told. I mean, most of my stories I've never told, and most of them I'll never get to tell because I would be betraying a client confidence. But in terms of parts of me that no one has ever interacted with, or things I've never shared in my media work and my discussions. I've tried to be kind of an open book. Like, I've tried to be very blunt. I'll tell you something fun. Here's something I've never told anybody, but it'll be obvious if you Google me. When I first was brought into the public sphere, like the media sphere, which was around 2019 when my book came out, and the New York Times Book Review loved it, and it did really well. And I got to do the Steve Harvey show. That was the first big media thing I did. And then I did like Rachel Ray, and I did a bunch of like those things. There was a publicist with my publisher, so they lined up all these things for me. And I found myself going, okay, what would a really successful divorce lawyer who's on TV look like? And what would he sound like? And what would he do? So if you watch those appearances, like they're so stiff. And they're so weirdly like, and it's not surprising to me that they did well, but they never really caught on, because I really was like trying to do what I thought a lawyer should do, or sound like how I thought a lawyer should sound, which is what I do in a courtroom. And then really I owe a lot of it to Mark from Soft White Underbelly, because I was like, I'm just going to go in and just like be me. Like, I didn't think anybody would really ever see it too much. And Mark is just such a cool guy. Like, we've become friends. And so I've gotten to know him since, and he's just a great human being. But he genuinely found me fascinating, and I found him fascinating. And that interview is just he and I just going, like, just me talking, And I'm you figured this out in this interview. Like, you could say to me, sandwiches, and I'll just go for an hour. I'll be like, well, the thing about sandwiches, So Mark kind of did that. And I didn't try to be anything. I just was me. And when it caught on, I went, oh, maybe it's just that easy. Maybe just be you. And so I've really tried in every subsequent appearance, including this one, to just be a really raw version of myself, a really honest version of who I am, and not try to put on the character. Because in the courtroom, I really do have to put on a character. I really have to put on a certain face, and it has to match the judge's temperament. It has to match the facts of the case. Like, you don't want to be representing a perpetrator of domestic violence, be a hard charging, like, that's the worst. Do not be a bull in a china shop. And that you want to be very low key, and you want to be very, patient, and you want to earn the right to sort of, in the cross-examination, sort of spin the logic. You don't want to be abusive, you don't want to be someone who's intense like that. So I don't think I've ever talked about the fact that I did it wrong before I did it right. So you can go on and look up, my first appearances, and they're all on the internet, and they're just stiff. Like, they're stiff and scared, because I really was trying to be something. I was like, here's what I should sound like, I think. And then, when I didn't do that and I was just me, the whole world was like, oh yeah, that guy, so I think people can just smell. I learned a real lesson about people's ability to smell inauthenticity. And I learned a lot about people's desire for authenticity. Like I don't really read the comments anymore, but because you'd go crazy if you do. But that first interview got like 20,000 comments. And I remember reading a lot of them. And a lot of them were like, man, this guy's real. Like, he's just saying it like it is. And I'm saying it like I see it to be. And I'm just being very blunt and honest. And, whether we like the truth or not that I'm saying, I think it's the truth. It's what I'm seeing. This isn't a theory. This is what I'm seeing. This is what my clients are telling me about the failure of their relationships. I'm not justifying it. I'm not saying it's a good thing, but it's reality, So I think that that's something I never really shared with anybody.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. Well, you asked.
I want to open this thing you said about authenticity, because I want to add a couple of things in and get your take. So one is maybe what's going on in your life. So you're trying to be yourself, but you've got some shit going on in your life. I've done 1,500 speeches. Sometimes I stand on the stage and I've got shit going on in my life that I can really feel. Nerves, maybe you want to be someone or some way, but you've got nerves and anxiety, and that's getting in the way. So I think you said it like most people say, authenticity, just be yourself. But I don't know that it's that easy. I think it's one of the hardest, easy things in the world that everyone talks about. So have you got any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, what I'll say is I am wired a particular way. I've never been afraid to speak publicly. Like, I'm doing a TED Talk in a couple of months. I was invited, and you can put me in front of 5 people or put me in front of 50,000 people, and I won't be any more nervous. Like, I'm very comfortable speaking publicly. So I have that. I know that's a superpower. I know that's a gift, and I know it's also partly practiced. But what I will say is, when you have shit going on in your life, I've never not had some shit going on in my life. And there are times where I've had unbelievably difficult things going on in my life. My mom passed away from cancer. She was on hospice for 2 years. I got divorced. I mean, all these things happened while I was a lawyer. But I found, for me, tremendous comfort in work. Like, for me, I've always jokingly said work is my favorite opiate. That anytime I'm in pain, like, I understand the rules at work. Like, I understand, like, I'm in many ways more comfortable in a courtroom than in my living room. I don't really know the rules in my living room. I don't know what I'm supposed to do, but I know what to do at work. Like, I know very well what to do at work. I'm very comfortable in that environment. I have to be careful about that, because work is so comfortable for me that I will just do it all the time. Like, I will work all the time if left to my own devices, because I love it. I'm passionate about it. I'm great at it. I get accolades for it, and people pay me. So I have every reason to just do it forever, but you're not building a life if all you do is your work, no matter how much you love your work, and you will fatigue yourself. If, like, I love sex, but if I did it for 14 hours a day, 7 days a week, I'd get tired, so you need to remember that, but I guess my point on authenticity is just that we have this imagination. I think it's what separates us from other animals. And we envision what we think we should behave like or sound like. We even compare other people to that. I remember my now 24-year-old son, when he was in his late teens, he was mad at me for something, the normal things a teenager gets mad at their dad for. I wouldn't let him do some stupid thing he wanted to do, probably. It was incredibly self-destructive, and he was real mad at me. And I remember him saying, like, Dad, like, you just, like, you don't realize how hard it is, being your son, and I said, you know what, you're right. I said, but I'd ask you, like, what are you comparing me to? Are you comparing me to, like, other fathers, or are you comparing me to your imagined ideal father? Because if you want to do that, I'll compare you to my imagined perfect son. And guess what? You're a disappointment compared to that person. Like, and I'm going to always, and learn this lesson, because I say it with love. If you compare your future wife to your idealized, imagined wife, she will fail you. I promise. Like, so compare me to real people. Like, don't even on Instagram or whatever, like, compare yourself to real people. Don't compare yourself to people with filters showing you their greatest hits. Like, compare yourself to people you see on the street, if you're going to compare yourself to anyone at all. So I think that the imagined self is very dangerous in some ways.
So we have a disruptors round, quick fire round. What is the most disruptive thing anyone has ever said or done to you?
I mean, immediately I thought about getting punched in the face a few times, but I've trained in the fighting arts for so many years. That's why my nose looks like this. So I find it very disruptive to have limbs broken and get choked out in jiu-jitsu and punched a few times. The most disruptive thing anyone ever said to me, I find silence very disruptive. There was a time in my life where I felt the need to fill all silence, and it was like the worst tell ever in poker. So I think sometimes silence is actually the loudest thing to me. So that's something very disruptive. I think those would be probably the two most disruptive forces to me would be actual physical force. Like there's something about, anybody who's not trained in the fighting arts, most of what undoes you when you get hit is the surprise. Like if you've ever like hit your head on something, it's like the surprise is actually the thing, So like the first time you get punched, the first time you're like training boxing or training martial arts and somebody just clocks you, it's like the shock of like, oh, what was that? And it's pretty, but then you go like, oh, okay, I'm all right. Like I'm all right. Like I could take more punishment than I thought. So that was the first time I got hit. And not in like a, I want to hurt you kind of a way, in like, yeah, it's here. We're here to hit each other. Let's do it, and it was very disruptive. It changed my whole brain chemistry. I think it definitely changed the shape of my nose. And my nose has been broken like 23 times, but who's counting? And it taught me a lot about what you can endure.
What's the most disruptive thing you've ever done?
Starting my own law firm 3 months out of law school. That was insane. If my son's a lawyer. If my son had done that, I would have been like, are you kidding me? Are you crazy? Like a lot of really good people in my life who really care about me and believe in me told me with great sincerity, do not do this. Like, do not do this. This is not Field of Dreams. If you build it, they might not come. Like, don't do it. And I'm so grateful that they loved me enough to say something I didn't want to hear, but I'm really, really glad they were wrong.
What's the biggest risk you've ever taken?
This is going to sound like a very cliche maybe or silly answer. I think every time I've ever got a dog, it was the most risky thing I've ever done, because you're guaranteeing your heart's going to get broken. Like you're guaranteeing you're going to fall in love with this stupid, wonderful little creature, and you're guaranteeing you're going to outlive it. And you're just taking this thing and going, okay, I'm going to let you in this incredibly profound, beautiful, wonderful way. And then I'm going to watch you slip out of my fingers. And every time I've ever done it, I just can't believe I did it. It's very present in my mind right now because I have two elderly dogs that I got when they were adopted when they were babies. And now they're both quite old. They're both 13. And, I just can't believe I was ever stupid enough to love them as much as I do. I think love is the most disruptive force. Like, I think that it cracks your heart open. It cracks your world open. Like, to love anything is just stupid. It's insane. It's a form of insanity to let anything in, because you will lose every single thing you love. Like you will. Like every marriage ends. It ends in death or divorce. Like every relationship ends. You will lose everyone. And yet we do it, and yet, like, what would life be without that love? Like, so to me, like, this love is such a disruption, it disrupts everything and it reformats everything in the most amazing way.
Wow. When I'd been with my wife a few months and we were just getting serious. And the first thing I ever bought her was a puppy West Highland Terrier. She always wanted a dog. Her whole life she'd had cats. And yeah, we put him down a couple of months ago. So 16 years he'd been with us the whole time. I remember thinking, I should not feel like this. I'm a grown man.
How could you not? I mean, because it's not just this amazing, wonderful creature that's nothing but love, but it's also this chapter. Like, there's this chapter of the three of you, and it's like that chapter is ending and it feels like the whole world is ending, and yet, like, every beginning comes from some other beginning's end, and that's what draws me to the work I do, is that, like, all of the combat piece of it aside and the intellectual puzzle of it aside, like, every beginning is some other beginning's end. Like, we're constantly breaking and we're constantly figuring out, like, new ways to be. And so, yeah, I mean, dogs are such a perfect, I have to believe that dogs are the way they are. Like, they're so perfect and so full of love and so wonderful. and they live such a short time. I have to believe that that's for some reason, to teach us something, to teach us some lesson about how brave it is to love.
What's your most brutal life lesson?
You know, it can tie to the dog thing, or it can tie to marriage, or it can tie to romantic relationships or friendships. Love is not gifted. Love is not permanently gifted. It's loaned. And I think that is a hard lesson. You know, it's a hard lesson to learn that the friendships you have will change and shift, and priorities will change and shift. Your children will grow. And they won't be what they were, you know, that you loved so much. There'll be something different that hopefully you love just as much, but there's something very different. So I think that that's a very hard lesson. It's a hard lesson for me, because I want everything I love to stay the same. I want everything beautiful to stay beautiful. You know, but I'm learning as each decade of my life passes that, you know, nothing gold can stay, you know, that like, sunrise can only last so long, sunset can only last so long, winter can only last so long, summer can only last. Like I've learned that there are seasons, there are chapters, you know, and that's a very, very brutal lesson to learn, because of course we want to hold on to beautiful, joyful, wonderful things, you know, but you can't hold on to it. The holding on to it is what causes you so much pain.
What's the best advice you ever remember receiving?
The hard thing to do and the right thing to do are the same thing. My father said that to me when I was very young, and it proved to be the truest wisdom anyone's ever said to me. That if you're faced with a quandary, that the hard thing to do and the right thing to do are almost always the same thing. God makes you take the stairs and the devil sends a limo. You know, you have to do the hard thing, like lean into the hard things, and the really great things are on the other side of that.
What's the worst advice you ever remember receiving?
Worst advice. I've received a lot of bad advice. I've probably given a lot of bad advice too. I mean, again, I think I've had a lot of well-intentioned bad advice. I had people who said, like, don't do it that way, you'll never make a dime. You know, don't go out on your own. You know, you need to have, you know, a team in order to be successful, or you need more experience to be successful. I think overall, the worst advice anyone's ever given me is not to believe my gut, not to trust my gut. Anytime somebody tells me don't just ignore your gut, like it leads to ruin. But yeah, I got a lot of bad advice in life. I really did. I got a lot of really bad nosebleed remedies that don't work. I got a lot of bad advice on how to cure the hiccups. I mean, I'm very blessed. I haven't been given a lot of bad advice, but I've always been the kind of man who kept his own counsel. You know, I don't ask people for advice. I read a lot, and I listen a lot to other people's point of view, and I pick the gems, you know, that resonate with me, but I keep my own counsel. I really don't, I know what works for me. You know, I don't, that's why I've always been very hesitant to like tell people, here's how you should do the thing. It's like, here's how I do the thing, and here's how it works for me, you know? And the people I'm most impressed by are people who parse it that way. Here's what works for me. Here's what I did. And I like that. I like being around people who share that very openly, and who share their successes and their failures. You know, probably the worst advice I ever got was being told nobody needs therapy. Nobody should go to therapy. There's no reason to go to therapy. I grew up in an environment where there's a lot of tough guy bravado in the fight world. And there was a lot of like, you don't need to go to therapy. Therapy's for wusses. And I think that's bad advice. I got into therapy in my late 20s, early 30s, and it really helped me see my blind spots, and really helped me, I think, develop as a human being. I wouldn't be where I am if it wasn't for the therapist I worked with.
What's your biggest failure?
I won't say my divorce, because I don't think it was. I think it was a different kind of success. My biggest failure would be how I let my fear of failure take my eye off of things that were temporary, that I only had one chance to enjoy, and I didn't enjoy it because I was so worried about failure. I was in a Whole Foods grocery store a couple of weeks ago, and there was this guy in his 30s, maybe late 20s, standing there, and he had like a little kid, like a 4 or 5 year old kid. And the kid's like, daddy, look at this. Daddy, look at this. Daddy, look. And he had that look on his face that like somebody who's just got like a little kid that wants so much of his attention. And he just had that look of like, oh my God, like I'm just here to get the chicken fingers. Like, please kid, just, you know. And he was like, daddy. And it occurred to me that I got called daddy by my sons for the last time at some point. Like I was daddy for years, and then I was dad, and I'm still dad. You know, like I call my son, hey, dad, what are you doing? But there was like, I stopped being daddy, you know, and if I had known when it was said that that was the last time it was ever going to be said, I would have wept, but I didn't, you know, and a lot of my kids, they're adult men now, and they have lives, and they have, you know, women that they love. One of them's getting married. I'll never get back the chances that I lost because I was so worried about providing for them. And I wanted so bad to be successful that I put myself in the office from 5 a.m. until 10 o'clock at night, you know, and it cost me a marriage. I missed so many things. I went to all the things that were important. I never missed a piano recital. I never missed a sports game. I never missed anything important, but like, there's so many little simple things. Like I could have maybe gone home early and played Frisbee with them, you know, and now I can't, you know, now they're adults, you know, we can't go out back and have a catch, you know? So I try with the young men who work for me, young women who work for me, to like force them. Like I try to really say to them, like, go home, put the file in the drawer and go home. Your kids are going to grow up and you're going to have missed it. So I think that was my biggest failure, is I missed a lot of things that I'll never, ever get to do again. And I don't beat myself up over it, because I know I was in part chasing this thing so I could give it to them. But man, I regret it. I wish I'd known.
This show is called Disruptors. What does the word disruptive mean to you?
I think, you know, disruptors are to me iconoclasts, you know, people that recognize that tradition is just peer pressure exerted by dead people. You know, I think that we need disruptors. The world needs disruptors, whether it's Martin Luther or whether it's Elon Musk, you know, or whether it's me, you know, like I think that anytime we don't accept the status quo and we're not afraid to do something completely different and boldly be ourselves or be committed to our vision, I think that's what it means to be a disruptor. I think the world turns in the directions it turns because people are disruptors. And I love that.
And you told us about your book earlier. Could you tell us the name of it so we can go grab it? And then also where we should follow you, where you're most active on, say, media.
I'm not super active on social media. You can find me on Instagram at NYC Divorce Lawyer. And that's usually, I only go on there just to like post when I'm doing something, and then I kind of vanish. I post in ghost, as Joe Rogan put it. But I just don't like the distraction that I get of too much social media use. My book is called How to Stay in Love, Practical Wisdom from an Unlikely Source. You can get it wherever books are sold. You can get it on Amazon. You can get it on Audible if you want to listen to me talk for 8.5 hours. Yeah, I'm working on another book that'll probably be out sometime in 2025. And that one is going to.
Can you give us a sneak on that? What it's called?
Yeah, it's about endings. It's about endings. That's what I can tell you. I was a hospice volunteer for many years when I first got out of college. And I've been a divorce lawyer for 25 years. And a friend of mine said to me a few months ago, what is it with you and endings? And I said, what do you mean? And he said, hospice, divorce, like you don't see a trend here, buddy. And I was like, oh, wow. What is that about? You're right. You know? So I started writing a book about endings and about what we can learn from endings. And, you know, it's some of the dog stuff we just talked about. It's some of the work things, the childhood things. So it's about that. And it's not totally fully formed yet. I'm still in the editing phase. So I have great editors, thank God.
I've had a lot of fun doing this interview, James. Jim,
thanks, Rob.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate you.
It was a blast. Thanks for having me. It's great to see you.
Thank you. Now, I've been on a mission for 17 years to help as many people on this planet get better financial knowledge. If, like me, you'd like to make, manage, and multiply more money, I recommend that you join my digital financial freedom platform. It's really easy to join. You just type in rob.sh rob.team. There you're going to learn my 4 M's of making, managing, maintaining and multiplying more money. And the even better news is there's no risk to you because it costs less than 20 pence a day to join. You can cancel anytime. Join right now. I'll also give you my 12-week Money Mastermind University completely for free. It exposes the banking system and teaches you how to play them at their own game. If you join rob.team right now, you get that completely for free. Just type in rob.team. We'll see you inside with the 10,000 other members in rob.team.